both parties were seeking treatment, they were never under the impression that their treatment records would be, quite frankly, open for the world to see. And by allowing access to these records to be released, that's exactly what would happen. And I would suggest that the court has heard, and those that are watching the trial have heard so very much information about both of these two young people, and that the balance has been struck, that they do know the issues of the case, and to now open these families to prying into their lives and what their children were going through, some very difficult issues, some things that are quite frankly not relevant to this case, but they are covered in those records. And to expose everyone involved to that type of prying, and I just don't think that the court has to go to that extreme. So for all of these reasons, the Commonwealth would respectfully ask that you impound the records. Your Honor, the Commonwealth would like it to be a permanent order, because essentially, if it's not, it really doesn't have much teeth. But if Your Honor was asking what we would see as a potential time frame, I would suggest 10 years.
Just briefly, Your Honor, it is a public trial. I just frankly leave it to the court's discretion as to the interpretation of a public trial versus the impoundment and the balancing that needs to be done. Other than that, I leave it to you. Thank you.
I will take it under advisement. It is required that I write written findings, and I will do so. I don't know that I will get to those before the conclusion of this trial. So until such time as a further order issued by this judge, the records are impounded, and those will include, at this point in time, medical records and mental health records, and the photos that were introduced. Although I seem to recall they may have been published on the overhead.
They weren't, Your Honor. We still them to medical center.
All right, then that's fine. So at least at this point in time, they will be impounded, and I will issue a written order. I agree with Ms. Flynn to the extent that I have an obligation to create a balance, and that the public has been made aware of much of the history of each and both of these young people in terms of their courses of treatment and so forth and so on. But that their communications with their various therapists and other healthcare providers stands on a different footing. So I will strike the balance that the law requires me to do, and a written order will issue to people.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So we set the resume with Dr. Breggin?
Yes, sir.
We're ready. Yes.
All right. Please have a call. Morning, Dr. Breggin.
Peter Roger Breggin, B-R-E-G-G-I-N.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. I believe when we left off, we were going through the counseling records of the defendant while she was being seen at Anchor Counseling. Is that true? Do you recall that we were going through that?
No, I don't.
Okay. And you would agree with me that the defendant was seeking treatment at Anchor Counseling from on or about June 18th, 2014 to July 22nd, 2014 or so. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be a time that, at least part of that time, would be the time that you're testifying she was involuntarily intoxicated.
Yes.
Okay. Now, during my questioning of you yesterday, in addition to using voluntarily intoxicated and using the Tremania, you testified yesterday that she was psychotic. Is that correct? Do you recall saying that?
I remember saying
But the term psychotic appears nowhere in your report. You would agree with that, sir?
Oh, right, we have so much more information.
Okay. So mania and psychosis are not necessarily the same thing, sir, are they?
What is,
Mania and psychosis are not necessarily the same thing.
no, that's right.
So has your opinion changed again that she was not only manic and involuntarily intoxicated? Are you now of the opinion that she's also psychotic?
In the sense of how extreme it was, psychotic can be used in two ways. One is that specifically hallucinations and delusions. I think she did have a delusional system going. The other way psychotic is used is just that it's a very extreme phenomenon we lose touch with reality. I think by either criteria she was. It's not so much a new opinion or characterizing it with different words. I've always thought it was extreme phenomena that put her out of touch with reality. This is putting a word on what I've always been saying.
You would agree with me, sir, you're testifying as an expert, so your words, your diagnosis, have a certain meaning for the judge, potentially. Correct?
Sure.
And nowhere in any of the submissions, your original report or your two-paragraph supplement, does it ever say that she was psychotic.
That's correct.
And in fact, you didn't testify to that during your direct examination. It wasn't until I asked you some questions that you now are saying that she was psychotic.
Yes, I used the word this time. Delusions, which is the word I've used, is psychotic.
Psychotic, you would agree with me, encompasses a lot more than that. It encompasses hallucinations.
Oh, no, not necessarily at all. People can be psychotic without either hallucinations or delusions.
But you would agree.
Certainly, people can be psychotic without having hallucinations. There's absolutely nothing in the world that says they have to have hallucinations.
And you would agree with me at the time, between June 2nd and July 2nd and July 12th, 2014, the defendant was going to camp, correct?
Yes.
Okay. She was interacting with friends at times, correct?
Yes.
She, in fact, had a sleepover a few days before Conrad died.
Yes.
Okay. She's able to go about her day. She's seeking therapy and talking to her therapist, correct?
Yes.
And you're telling us now, testifying during all that time, she was psychotic.
But she had a delusion about her relationship.
My question is, are you testifying that during that time, when she's able to do all of those things, she is psychotic?
Well, she's psychotic in that she's harboring a psychotic.
I'm not trying to interrupt you, sir. That's just a yes or no. Is it your opinion that during that time frame when she was able to do all of those things, that she was psychotic?
Yes, she had a psychotic delusion during that time.
Well, your testimony was she was psychotic yesterday.
Yeah, I'm talking about the delusion.
Those are two different things, sir. You would agree with me. Delusions could be part of psychosis, but psychosis is an independent term, correct?
No, delusions are psychotic.
You can have delusions and not be psychotic, can't you, sir? They're not.
Not by the definitions that I've worked with for 40 or 50 years. When you have delusions, that's the psychosis.
Okay. So during this time frame, she's able to do all those things, and in your opinion, she was psychotic during this time.
Yes, people walk around with delusions all the time and carry out their activities. In fact, the very original case, McNaughton, going way back to where this all started, McNaughton had a delusion that the Prime Minister of Great Britain was personally persecuting him, and he tried to shoot him, but he shot his secretary instead. And yet he was functioning in all kinds of ways while he held the delusion.
But she was
He
in.
was actually planning, he
Right.
got a gun, which was difficult, and so on.
It-
So you can have a... let me finish.
I didn't say anything, sir. Please go right ahead.
So you can have a delusion and walk around thinking that you're a God or Jesus and be functioning all kinds of ways.
But she didn't think she was God or Jesus, sir.
No, she thought she was this grand, helping person who was going to help her boyfriend get what she wanted, and then help his parents overcome their grief and manage this whole situation. She was grandiose as a lunatic.
And she's only grandiose, deluded, and psychotic with regard to one small part of her life, Conrad.
Actually, it's such a large part of her life that it comes up twice in the anchor records. For the very first time, she's talking about the effect of dishonor. Once in the anchor records, she talks about how overwhelmed she is by her relationship with Carter. At another time in the anchor references, there's a statement about how she believes she's a caretaker for her boyfriend.
And she also Sorry, go right ahead, sir.
It's hard I want to get at the facts with you. It's hard when we...
But that wasn't my question, sir. If I could please pose a question. Thank you, sir. Now, during the time when you're saying she was psychotic, she is in therapy, correct? Right. So, yes, she's in therapy, correct? And you would agree with me she goes back to the therapist on July 15th, now 3 days after Conrad is dead, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it notes in her anchor counseling that she has to be redirected to talk about the death of her boyfriend, correct? She didn't bring it up according to these records. She had to be redirected to do that.
Yes, that shows you how disturbed she is. Okay. I mean, imagine being so disturbed.
You answered my question, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You answered my question.
Whatever elaboration on your answers, Charles, Mr. Madeira, we wish to pursue, they can do on your.
She also told her therapist, according to the records, that she later found out he used carbon monoxide to kill himself, correct? Recall seeing that in the records?
I think so.
Okay. She knew he was using carbon monoxide to kill himself, didn't she? Okay. So she was untruthful to her therapist, according to these notes.
Objection.
Okay. Well, you would agree with me that what she said to her therapist, according to the notes, is inconsistent with the text messages.
Objection.
It was inconsistent. Okay. So when it comes to telling adults about what was really going on, she is inconsistent, correct?
I would go beyond that and say that she's not letting on to adults what's going on. None of this is letting on about their lives. She's certainly not letting on about the stuff.
And I appreciate that, sir, but I'm not asking about any other kids. I'm asking about the defendant, okay? And so you would agree with me, we went over it yesterday, that she initially didn't say anything to her mother about Conrad dying in a car, correct? Okay, and she gives inconsistent statements versus her text to her therapist, correct? Okay, so she also, we talked yesterday, she talks about, to her therapist, about her sadness over the loss of her friendship with Alicia, correct?
Yes.
Okay. She also talks about another friend, Alice, correct, with her therapist?
Yes.
Okay, and she talks about, after Conrad passes away, that she's happy that Alice has reached out to her. Even her friend Alice, that had stopped talking to her, reached out in support and said she would attend the wake, correct?
Yes.
You've read the text messages between Alice and the defendant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anything in there suggest Alice agreed to go to the wake?
Oh, I don't know that kind of detail.
Okay.
My God, it's 10,000.
I understand that, sir, but when counsel went over the text yesterday, you had a lot of detail. So I'm just asking the same questions. All right.
Actually, I think not.
Right.
I think she didn't go.
And in fact,
Do not speculate. If you do not have a memory of that, sir, that is a sufficient answer.
And in fact, when she went back to therapy, the defendant went back to therapy on July 22nd, she again talks about Alice. Yes?
Yes.
And says that her ex-friend Alice did not attend, correct?
Yes, that actually is my answer.
So a good part, at least a portion of her therapy, is talking about the fact that Alice might go to the wake and then Alice doesn't go to the wake, correct?
Objection. Good part.
And the document will speak for itself.
Thank you very much.
Is that all right? That's already been in.
It has, Your Honor. Exhibit is 6, for the record, 60. Thank you. Now, sir, with regard to the dose that the defendant had been prescribed back in April, that was 10 milligrams, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, April of 2014? Thank you.
We're talking about the selection, right?
Celexa, correct? 10 milligrams of Celexa.
Right.
Nothing to indicate that the prescription changed after that, correct?
Well, when it starts is unclear, so I'm not sure we're talking about that.
How is that unclear, sir? It says it right in the medical records.
Yeah, but it doesn't get started. Let me get this out. What date are you citing for its beginning?
I'm asking you, sir, what date are you citing for its beginning? I'm using April 1st. The medication, well, probably more detail if you wish. But I believe it started on April 1st. So April 1st, 2014, 10 milligrams of Celexa.
No, we started at 5 for a week, and then 10.
And you would agree with me, going from 5 to 10 after a period of a few days is fairly standard?
Yes, that
Okay.
was the standard use of the drug.
Right. And 10 milligrams is even though 10 milligrams of Celexa is a very low therapeutic dose.
Oh, not for her. First of all, there is no therapeutic dose for her. It's not approved for children. Second of all, she has liver dysfunction, which means she's going to get whacked with a lot more of the drug than one would expect from 10 milligrams. She's anorexic and ill, and now bulimic, which means that she's again at a disadvantage. She's also a small person. Not getting more medium, but she's not a big person. So there are many factors that would make that first not an appropriate dose at all, and secondly, a really hazardous dose with her physical illnesses and her liver dysfunction.
So the prescription is around April 1st, 2014, and at some point shortly thereafter is 10 milligrams, correct?
Yeah.
So your testimony, she became involuntarily intoxicated 3 months later?
Yeah, that's exactly what is said by the...
I just asked you, yes or no? 3 months later.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So a transformation occurred out of nowhere 3 months later.
Well, no, not out of nowhere.
Okay. So, but you would agree with me, sir, that you have previously testified that the most serious adverse reactions to SSRIs occurs within 1 to 4 days.
Oh, I wasn't talking about involuntary intoxications. I'm talking about a review I've done internally of drug company documents, which shows that things like anxiety and agitation, that a lot of them occur in the first 3 to 4 days, and I wanted to alert physicians to that.
Sir, haven't you previously testified in the case of Michigan? I thought you were done, sir.
Since you interrupted me before I finished my last word, it appears like I'm done, and I'm not.
I apologize.
That's happening all the time. Okay.
In the case of Michigan versus Bernace, Bernaiche, isn't it true you testified, sir? In my experience, including looking at day 1, 2, and 3 days after drugs, because I get the data inside the drug companies, day 1, 2, 3, 4 are real days when most of the serious adverse reactions occur. Didn't you testify to that in that case?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And in that case, sir, you were testifying that the defendant was involuntarily intoxicated. Isn't that true? And in that case, sir, this would be a gentleman who was had been at a bar or a bar, correct? Do you recall that he had left, retrieved a gun, and came back and began shooting at people?
It's pretty vague for me, but if you refresh me, it will.
Sure. All right. And then when asked why he did it, he said because the people that he shot at had beat his ass earlier. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. And you testified, despite his statement, that he had gone back there to shoot people who had beat his ass. You found that he was involuntarily intoxicated.
I actually don't remember the details of the case.
Fair enough. But does that sound familiar? And I could show you the transcript.
It's much more complicated than what you're presenting.
He has indicated he has no present memory of that.
Okay.
If you wish to try to refresh his memory, I will allow that.
Thank you. Do you remember I know you don't remember the facts necessarily. Do you remember the statement I just read that in your experience, looking at day 1, 2, and 3 after drugs, because I get the data inside the drug companies, day 1, 2, 3, 4 are real days when most of the serious adverse reactions occur?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you recall saying that?
Whether you have a memory, you have a memory of
Well, I
that.
have no memory of saying it. I can disagree with it.
Oh, okay. If you don't disagree with it, then that's fine too. But in this particular case, just yes or no, we're not dealing with days 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're dealing with days 90 or so, correct? Yes. Okay. And then the transformation, using your word, ends around or starts to taper off. Transformation tapers off around July 15th or so.
No, I think that it's still active for the first 2 months when she's communicating with him in heaven and telling him that she's doing things with him. And happy she is that he's shining down on her from heaven. I think there are very much delusional elements still going on with that.
So what snapped her out of the transformation? What stopped it?
Oh, I think it was an acute, we talked about this at length yesterday, I think there was an acute change over the days right afterward, but it isn't all over by any means.
Is it all over by the time she's planning Homers for Conrad in September of 2014?
No, she's still doing after him, communicating with him, and having to feel really good about everything that's happening. She's literally feeling good.
Now, if it's all about him, sir, let me ask you this. Did you review text messages between the defendant and Tom Gamble?
Yeah, I read all of it.
Okay. And you would agree with me that Tom Gamble, a friend of Conrad, reaches out to the defendant to ask her why this fundraiser is in Plainville and not where Conrad lived, correct? Do you recall reading that?
Yes, I do know something about that.
And the defendant seems to get somewhat frustrated with Tom and says to him essentially, don't take credit for my idea.
Objection. Abstain.
Did you read that text message, something to that extent?
I don't remember that particular one.
Do you remember the tone of the text messages between the defendant and Tom Gamble about the fundraiser?
Objection to tone of text.
Okay. Do you remember the text messages?
No, out of the thousands.
No. Okay. Now, sir, you testified that at the time of this event, meaning the defendant talking to Conrad and the Conrad dying, she did not understand the wrongfulness of her actions?
Yes.
Okay. But you would agree with Now, sir, you testified that at the time of this event, meaning the defendant talking to Conrad and the Conrad dying, she did not understand the wrongfulness of her actions?
Yes.
But you would agree with me, sir, that you learned from the evidence, you said you read the grand jury minutes, that the defendant's phone had some of the text messages between the defendant and Mr. Roy were deleted off of the defendant's phone.
Yes, that was Mr. Roy's idea.
That was Mr. Roy's idea.
Oh, yeah, he's the one who brings it up in the texting. He says to her, I want you to delete, I'm deleting my messages, and I want you to delete them. She says, why?
Okay? That's
She
fine.
actually went into the formation of my idea of how naive she was in regard to this. She didn't know what she was doing. She says, why?
Isn't there a second conversation about that on the night Conrad dies, where the defendant asks him to erase a text message, and Conrad says, but you keep texting me?
Actually, what she says is, did you erase them?
Right.
She doesn't say what you said. She said, did you erase them? And she's asking him because he was talking to her about deleting them. But she actually very clearly has no idea why he wants her to delete the messages. It's one more piece of evidence about her innocence, that what's going on inside her is not criminal.
But she texts Sam Boardman, you would agree with me, that if the police get her phone, she's going to jail.
Yes, and that is a very good demonstration of her innocence. What happens is she gets a text from his mother that the police have come to her house, that they are discussing suicide and homicide, and they want to know if anybody has encouraged him to commit suicide. And it's at that point that she gets this idea that, my God, people think I could go to jail, that I've done something bad. It never occurs before she gets this direct information from the mom that the police are there and it's homicide related to suicide and has to do with encouraging. And she had encouraged, so she's thinking, my God, what's going on here? And she calls a friend. Now, how naive is that? That she calls a friend and discusses it with her. And then she doesn't go and throw away her phone. There's no criminal intent here. She keeps her phone.
I will determine if there is criminal intent. That answer is stricken.
Oh, I didn't understand that. I apologize.
Sir, she says, you would agree with me, his family will hate me, I'm going to jail. Not I could go to jail or maybe I'm going to jail.
Yeah.
So she understands.
She understands right then and there that there's been some dramatic shift that she never imagined, which is the police are talking to his mother and saying there's homicide involved here. We're looking for anyone who encouraged him. That would scare the devil out of anybody, as naive as you might have been about what you were doing beforehand. And then she doesn't go ahead and throw anything away.
Isn't it also?
She doesn't protect herself.
Isn't it also true, sir, that when the police came to question her and take her phone, she tells the police she didn't think anything of it when she and Conrad were on the phone on the 12th?
Yeah, by then she's scared to death. She knows now the police are coming to her. She had to have been frightened out of her mind.
Sir, would you agree with me the statement she gives to the police was inconsistent with what is in those text messages?
Objection. Overruled.
Oh, I think it is inconsistent. By now she's a scared 18-year-old girl who has been told the police are going to be coming, but she hasn't done anything to protect herself, but she's.
She's been told the police are coming, sir? Didn't the police just show up at her school?
No, I'm talking about by mom. She's been told quite a bit earlier that the police are looking into, did anybody encourage the suicide? She has to know they're talking about her because she's already told people she was on the phone with him at the time of his death. So obviously she realizes, because she's a bright girl, she's deluded, but she's very intelligent, she gets it immediately. One would have to believe that.
Okay, so she's smart and psychotic at times.
Which is extremely common. In fact, isolated delusions are extremely common in highly intelligent people. Delusions are often a phenomena of high intelligence. They're bad ideas.
So your testimony is she didn't understand she was breaking the law by sending these text messages?
Well, I'm certain she didn't know she was breaking the law.
Isn't it also, sir, that you have stated that you find most of the laws of the land to be coercive and unjust?
I can't remember saying anything like that.
Okay. Can I get a moment, Your Honor?
Okay.
Thank you. Did you publish a book called The Psychology of Freedom? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall stating, in general, I have tried to dissuade my children from the idea that authorities or laws are sacred. Do you recall saying that?
I recall writing that.
Okay.
I think I do.
There is a superstition that people are morally obliged to obey laws and even to worship laws, correct?
Yes.
I do not think so, correct?
I can imagine having written that.
Okay. I personally believe that the individual is obliged to listen to his or her own conscience.
Sustained.
Neither you nor I asked to be born into this particular nation, nor even into this particular earth.
Objection.
Counsel, how is this relevant to this testimony condition of this cause during the relevant period of time?
Your Honor, I would respectfully suggest it goes to his bias. He's offering an opinion that she couldn't conform her behavior to the law. If he doesn't believe in the underlying law that the Commonwealth has charged her with violating, that goes absolutely to his bias.
Mr. Cataldo?
I think it's discretion. I don't agree in general of certain laws. He's not complaining about valid law or not. I just don't. I think it's much too remote of his particular individual needs about what laws is he talking about? Speeding? Is he talking about?
Especially approve of the Bill of Rights, but in general, I find most of the laws of the land and unjust.
Oh, I didn't remember writing that. I certainly don't believe it anymore. In fact, that whole book I actually withdrew from circulation. I wrote the book in 1980. I actually wrote it in the 70s, got it published in 1980, which is 37 years ago. Surface respect of view.
So that the philosophies engendered in that book you no longer hold?
Oh, I've rejected them on a number of occasions, Your Honor, and in print.
So you wrote a book and you've changed your mind about what you said in the book.
Oh, absolutely. And the philosophy, it's not.
You would agree with me that the defendant knew that the right thing to do, strike that, she suicide.
Yes, I know that.
Yes.
That's how much in her mind she just has these ideas about wanting to help with all her money.
Okay, so being, as you call her, a young girl, she happens to know 3 people who are suicidal and saves 2 of them?
Well, they're both quite specific. She has a girlfriend who she has a long-term relationship with, who she says was suicidal at the beginning of the relationship, and she helped her. And the second story is of a girl who calls her from the hospital, who she meets in the hospital. And remember, she wanted to help people in the hospital. And after the hospitalization, this girl calls her. This is a text. And says, according to Michelle, you saved my money. So it's just one more thing about her intense wish to save lives and save people. She is not somebody who did she?
Now, you would agree with me that during your initial testimony or your initial findings, you formed your opinion that she was involuntarily intoxicated before you even talked to a single person in this case. Isn't that true?
The records indicated to me that she had involuntary intoxication. I then wanted to do that as I could. My initial impression, I always try to get an impression before I talk. Try to get an impression from that.
You would agree with me it can be dangerous to form an opinion before you've finished looking at everything.
Well, definitely you don't want to come up with a final opinion until you've checked everything out. Look at this case. This
Right.
is one of the 2 cases where I've actually changed an opinion as I got more and more information.
So just so we're clear, you would agree with me that your opinion changed from your initial opinion.
The opinion that she was a girl without any underlying problems,
Okay.
which would have been quite remarkable.
So you initially formed your opinion before you talked to anybody, correct?
I didn't finalize it.
Okay. And you then talked to some individuals, correct?
Yeah.
And formed an opinion?
Well, it confirmed the opinion that was involved.
Okay, so it confirmed. So then you looked at some more materials and realized that your baseline and part of your opinion was wrong, correct? And now you would agree with me there's still a lot of materials you haven't even looked at. How about the 6 or 7 therapists that she saw between the, you would agree with me that, strike that, The records that you received were from McLean's Hospital, correct? That were 5 pages long, correct?
Yes.
Completely incomplete, right?
Yeah, I learned that immediately.
You later, most recently, received the Anchor counseling records.
Yes.
Okay. You received the records from when she went to Walden for anorexia, correct?
Yes, I had those records before early.
Yep, you had those early, right? Okay. And then you had her primary care records. Okay. And we have her pediatric records. Okay. Okay. So while I can tell you what her length, weight, and head circumference was when she was 3 months old, we don't know who she was seeing as a therapist for her, other than Anchor counseling. We don't know, do we?
May I approach, Your Honor?
Okay?
Can I have one moment, please, Your Honor?
Okay?
You would agree with me that on July 10th into July 11th, 2014, the defendant is telling friends, specifically Sam Boardman, that Conrad is missing, correct?
Yes.
But at the same time, you would agree with me, she's communicating with Conrad.
Yes.
If I could bring up an example, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay? Need the,
On to July 10th, 2:54 p.m., please. Now, you would agree with me, and just so you can see, the green is the phone it was extracted on, and this would be a text message. So at that time, text message between Michelle, the defendant, and Conrad Roy, you should bring it and ask them if they know how to fix it for you. Do you remember that text message? Okay. And what are they talking about there? Do you know?
The water pump that produced the carbon monoxide is broken, and he already has his own toolkit. He's working on fixing it.
Okay. Now, please go down, Mr. Reset. Now, 3:01, July 10th, 2014, the defendant texts Sam Boardman. He's missing, like they don't know where he is. Correct?
Yes.
Sam inquires if it's Conrad, which the defendant says, yeah. Correct?
Yes.
And Sam inquires, how did you find that out? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Please go down to the next one. To which the defendant responds to Sam, I texted his mom because I was getting really worried, like he always texts me in the morning, and he didn't, and he just stopped answering last night. So I asked him if he was okay, and she said they've been looking for him for the past few hours, and they can't find him. True?
Yes, you're reading correct.
Okay, thank you. Please go down to the next one. Now, there's a text back between the defendant and Conrad, where Conrad asks, who would I bring it to? Correct?
Yes.
Presumably still talking about the water pump, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Objection, move to strike.
no,
thank you. Now, the next text message now, this is at the same time, 3:06, Sam is inquiring, does he have his own car? Don't worry too much about it yet. Worrying won't get anywhere. For all you know, he could have, HAE, gone out and his phone died. It's okay, he will be okay. Correct?
Yes.
Now, at the same time, again, 3:06, text message between Conrad and the defendant, IDK, I don't know, haha, a place that sells them. They discuss Lowe's or Home Depot. And then I'm going to try to fix it, bucket. Correct?
Yes, that's Carter saying.
Yes.
I
True.
mean, excuse me, it's Conrad saying.
Next one, please.
Conrad saying.
Now, 3:09, to Sam. Yeah, I think so. So I mean, last night he called me in his truck, and he was getting something at the store. But yeah, you're right. I don't get why he wouldn't be home by now. His mom and sister are giving me updates. True?
Yes.
You would agree with me in looking at her phone, there's nothing to suggest she was speaking to Conrad's mother or family members at that point.
I don't have the evidence to see that. No.
Okay. Yet she's telling Sam that she is.
Well, I have no idea whether there's other ways of communicating, but yes, there's no evidence in this.
Clearly, She knows where Conrad is when she's texting Sam that she doesn't know where he is.
Objection. Sustained.
Please continue on. Text message between Michelle and the defendant and Conrad. You don't think you'll be able to, and the people at those stores...
Sorry, where are we?
I'm sorry, it's the highlighted one, sir. 310.
Oh, okay.
You don't think you'll be able to, and the people at those stores would know how. Just ask them and say it's for your work. That's the defendant to Conrad, correct?
Yes.
Please continue on. 312. Now, this from Sam. He probably would have told you if he wasn't planning on coming back, don't worry yet. Which the defendant now responds to Sam, yeah, that's true, he would have. And okay, I'm going to try to stay calm. Correct?
Objection. Is there a question here from a witness?
I'm going to get to that, Your Honor. That was my last one, and I'm going to get to my question. Thank you. Now, yesterday, when talking about when the defendant was discussing cutting with one person and other topics with other people, I asked you about that, correct? I asked you about whether or not you opined that she was in fact cutting based on those text messages. You recall that?
No, I actually had two incidents that I had already found in my book, which I found last night, where friends witnessed her having cut herself.
Okay.
So I did find two confirmations that people saw she was cutting herself, and I had marked them up already.
Sir,
It had gone into my opinion that she wasn't being cutting.
my question was, did you opine whether or not she was cutting? That was my question. And your answer is what?
I believe she was cutting.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think it was witnessed by other people.
Okay. And I asked you, or you suggested that I was suggesting that she was making it up, correct? Yeah, I understand. Fair to say, in my question of you, I was inquiring if you thought maybe she made it up, correct?
Oh, I don't remember all the details.
Okay.
I thought that.
Okay. And you agree with me, you testified that to do so would take a real extreme ability.
Yes, I actually thought it would be possible.
Okay. Well, you would agree with me, isn't that exactly what's going on here?
No.
She's texting Sam that he's missing while talking to Conrad at the same time.
No, I think that what's going on here is somebody so disturbed that she doesn't even know what she's doing. She's actually alerting people to the possibility that something has happened to him while she's talking to him about something happening to him. She's, I can't find a rational reason why she's ever been doing this. I think it's part of a very confused, delusional state where she's coming in and out of what's happening, what am I doing?
How about the rational reason that she wanted to know how her friends would react when he killed himself?
Objection to rational.
I'm just using his term, Your Honor.
Objection. She's putting the word, the thought process.
I'm using your words, sir. You said rational, and I'm saying, isn't that a rational reason why she may have done this? She wants to see how they're going to react.
No, I can't imagine that would be motivating her to be opening up this horrible, bizarre activity she's involved in. You would expect her not to do anything like that.
But she's suggesting that she's saying she's concerned for him while at the same time talking to him.
Yeah, I think it's really crazy.
And in fact, Sam does, I would suggest to you, she then shows concern, correct?
Well, of course, yeah.
Okay. And you would agree with me that and this continues on until the next day. We don't have to go through it, but this continues on until the next day, correct?
I remember how long it continued. Yes, because
It continues for a while. She's telling people he's missing, she doesn't know where he is, she's getting updates from the family, all while speaking to him, correct?
yes, it's very strange.
And you would agree with me that this young lady, Sam, was the one who was important to Michelle, correct?
Right.
And Michelle looked up to Sam.
Yes, she tells her how much she admires her.
And she would say,
And tells her how much she admires her.
okay, and she would say things to Sam that she would tell Sam she doesn't want to disappoint her.
Oh, she says that all the time, yes.
All right. Now, if you could look at here, April 9, 2014, 5:01 p.m., text message from Sam Boardman to the defendant, where she says, and I'm so proud of you for having the sandwich, though. If you're telling me the truth, when you say you had it back, I don't even know anymore. But I do know that I have an issue with people that lie to you. And what I mean is that no matter how many times you say, Sam, you're right, I'm doing it, you're right. I want to get better, I'm 100% committed. It doesn't mean shit when you're still dishonest and intentionally don't eat, correct?
Yeah.
Sam says in this text message and another, she doesn't like it when people lie to her, does she?
Right.
Okay. And Michelle knew that, didn't she? That Sam doesn't like it when she lies to her.
Right.
Okay. And on July 10th and July 11th, Michelle is telling Sam that Conrad is missing while he's not.
Right.
Okay. And in fact, Conrad does go missing and dies on July 12th, correct?
Right.
And she never tells Sam, hey, I found him, does she, between the 10th and the 12th? She never tells Sam, I found him, or he came home, does she?
I know.
She keeps up the text that Conrad is missing from July 10th, 2014, to when he actually dies, and she says, on 8:02 on the 12th, I think he died. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. This would be the same girl she doesn't want to disappoint and she doesn't want to lie to, correct?
No, I'm not sure what you're getting at. This is very, very.
Don't worry about what you're getting at.
Just a few more questions, sir. I'm winding it down, Your Honor. Fair to say you're not a board certified in psychiatry, correct? Okay. You had no longer, or if ever, had medical privileges at a hospital?
Well, I had medical privileges back in the 70s and 80s. Since then, I've learned ways that my patients don't have to go to hospitals. And most people in private practice don't have privileges. You have to be too involved with the scale.
And have you ever taken part in a clinical trial involving an SSRI?
No.
Fair to say, and you testified that you've, in direct, that you've testified as an expert in a lot of cases, fair to say that many of those cases involve testifying for plaintiffs against manufacturers of SSRIs?
Yes, I have been involved in that.
Okay. And many of your books are very critical of SSRIs.
Yes.
Okay. And how many patients, ballpark it, how many patients have you seen in your many years as a psychiatrist?
I really don't have a ballpark.
How many of them have you ever prescribed an SSRI for yourself?
All the time. I'm prescribing SSRIs all the time because I'm a doctor of last resort that people come to when they're on the SSRI and you can't get off of them. Every week I have patients on SSRIs. You can't get off of them, you're working around it.
And aren't they coming to
They've had very bad reactions to SSRIs in the past.
and aren't they coming to you to get off of the SSRIs? That's the point of seeing you. You're prescribing it for them to wean them off of it.
In the hope. Sometimes it doesn't succeed.
Fair to say you're very critical of your own profession, psychiatry.
Yes, especially in recent years, it's drugged
And
everywhere.
it's your position that psychiatrists are mere salesmen for drug companies, correct?
I do believe it's correct. It's come down to that.
And you believe that the relationship between your own people in your own field and pharmaceutical companies is an unholy alliance, correct?
Yes,
Okay. All right. And you do not believe that depression is a disease?
I don't believe it's a physical causes that we know of. I do know of psychological deprivation, but I don't know about biochemical environment.
You also don't believe that ADHD exists, do you?
Well, I think the behaviors is very good science thinks it's a real disorder.
And you don't believe that children should be medicated for it?
No, I don't think we should medicate our children for their behavior.
And in fact, you believe that prescribing stimulants for children diagnosed or even adolescents diagnosed with ADHD is the form of child abuse?
On the part of the people who know better, the professionals, yes.
Didn't you write an article where you said that society is abusing their children?
Oh, yeah, but I'm not talking about parents. Yes, I think we're going to look back on it, having 20% or 30% of our boys on stimulant drugs. It's really a very strange and harmful and abusive phenomenon.
Don't you think that saying that society is abusing their children, aren't parents part of society?
Yeah, I'm not blaming the parents. They don't know what's happening. They make that very clear.
Okay. Now, with regard to Conrad Roy, what did you look at? You looked at medical records of his, correct? Did you watch the video, Conrad Roy's video? You did. Okay. And did you look at all of his records?
Yes, everything I do.
I just need one moment, Your Honor. I just need one set of medical records. Thank you. In reviewing those records, one set of records would be stepping stone, correct, of Mr. Roy?
Yes.
And that would be the last set of records prior to his death, correct? And how many times did Mr. Roy go to stepping stone, if you know?
Just a few times and then he stopped.
So again, sir, just looking at these records here, these would be from Conrad Roy going to stepping stones just a few times, correct? Yet the medical records for the defendant are 5 pages and a handful of pages from Anchor Counseling. Those are the most recent records, correct?
No.
What?
Well, you had two questions. No to those are the most. Yes to those are the most recent. No to that's all the records I have.
Those are all the records since she was 14, correct? Just one moment, Your Honor. I just want to find something I'm looking for. Now, on the records for Conrad Roy for June 30th, 2014, do you remember a safety plan that was prepared?
Yes, you have to show it to me.
If I may, Your Honor?
This is the stepping stone record.
It is, and for the record, Your Honor, Exhibit 38. Now, would you agree with me that this is a safety plan for Conrad Roy dated June 30th, 2014?
Yes.
And this would be somewhat contemporaneous for when the defendant had her transformation and became involuntarily intoxicated.
Yes, it's just right about then. I think July 2nd is where she really goes over the top.
Now, at the bottom of the page, you would agree with me for this for Conrad Roy, June 30th, 2014. It asks, it says the one thing that is most important to me and worth living for. Correct? That's what was at the bottom of this safety plan. Yeah.
Because she says my family.
Right.
She says that in this text again and again.
Right. So,
And Michelle says that's right.
sir, let me just ask my question if I could. So on June 30th of 2014, when Mr. Roy is asked essentially, what's the one thing worth living for, he says, my family.
Objection, Your Honor.
Document was legal itself.
Thank you. Now, sir, a little bit before this transformation, the defendant is in McLean's Hospital, correct?
Yes.
And at the tail end of her stay at McLean's Hospital, she gets her phone privileges back, correct?
Yes.
She begins to text a lot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And fair to say that she is texting quite a lot about a particular person. She's texting about Alice, isn't she? Okay. And do you recall using the terminology with someone by the name of Olivia that she is obsessed with Alice after she gets out of McLean's?
Objection.
Does she talk a lot about this person to her friends?
Which person?
Alice.
After
Does she tell her friends that she has learned a lot about her relationship with Alice, and she talked a lot about Alice in her therapy at McLean's?
Objection.
That's from the text.
Yes.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
Do you remember seeing that document?
Yes.
Do you also remember seeing a text message to Jen Robillard on June 19, 2014, saying that she used a track phone to text Alice, but Alice didn't know who it was?
Objection, Your Honor. This is a witness, an expert witness, and we're just reading them text.
I'm going to ask him a question about if he considered it, Your Honor, in a moment.
If it's in the text, I'll allow it, subject to a motion to strike. I don't know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
I'm almost near where I need to be, Your Honor. Do you recall her texting Jen about texting Alice, but Alice didn't know who it was?
I need to get a clear refresher on it. It's a vague memory. I'd like to see it.
Do you have it with you? You have your own copy, correct? Okay, I'll pull it up.
Pages.
Sorry, Your Honor, this took so long. June 19, 2014, 12:03 in the morning. Do you remember this text?
Yeah, I wanted to see it in context.
I understand.
Yeah.
You agree with me? She texted Jen Robillard. I texted Alice from my track phone, and she had no idea who it was, and it's the greatest moment of my life.
Objection.
The text is already in counsel.
Do you recall seeing that?
Yeah.
Okay. fair to say she then goes on to discuss with Jen, what should she do? Should she pretend?
Why is this witness explaining a text to me?
Because I'm going to ask him if it factored in his opinion. Thank you, sir. The fact that she is talking about Alice right when she gets out, that she's saying that she talked a lot about her in therapy, and texting her is the gravest moment of her life, did that factor at all in your opinion about what was going on in her head between July 2nd, 2014 and July 12th, 2014?
Yeah, it's very disturbing that all this is going on in her life with she says she's got a boyfriend she lives without, who is in danger, she's about to come and save his life, and she's talking about this long-term failed relationship and teasing this girl is the greatest moment of my life. That's disturbing. Okay?
But she's not even involuntarily intoxicated yet and engaging in what you call disturbed behavior.
Well, she's been under the influence of the drugs all along. I'm not saying it's an involuntary intoxication, but I made the point earlier that she's been under the influence of the drugs all along. And I can't tell in this case whether it's even drugs or whether it's normal adolescent hurt-feeling girls and backbiting and all these other things. And frankly, all this doesn't look half as bad as what I've routinely seen like 3 children girls.
Okay. And again, sir, I'm not asking about other. So you would agree with me that this behavior to you is disturbing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially the part, not bothering Alice, that's routine kid stuff. The disturbing thing is that she's playing it up as the greatest moment of her life in the middle of all this tragedy she's involved in.
Well, at this point, she's at McLean's, sir.
You know?
Okay.
All this she's gone to McLean mainly because of her very painful involvement with Conrad. And yet she's imagining that the biggest thing in her life is this girl. This is not very in-touch behavior.
I'm sorry, so you're saying Conrad Roy's behavior caused her to have to go to McLean's?
Oh, I think the relationship with Conrad is very key to those McLean, and that comes out as soon as she leaves McLean, and we get more notes about talking with people at Anchor, and the two themes of Anchor are, one, that she feels overwhelmed by the relationship with Conrad, and then stating specifically by the therapist that she feels she's the caregiver for this disturbed boy, I think disturbed sick or something boy. So, yeah, that's the real truth.
The other,
And this other is like where her childhood fantasy is going.
in addition to Conrad, sir, at Anchor Counseling, the other theme she talks about is Alice. And that after Conrad dies,
She's not in a relationship and months and months and months.
right, but she clearly wants to.
Yeah, this is a little strange. I think
Yep.
it's not far out like what happened when we got sick. That's why I don't even know what the struggle is. Because it's not that often what girls do with each other.
But you would
I
agree.
can't even say that. Remember when I said those horrible nightmares of Prozac induced, where she imagined that the devil would want to
Uh-huh.
kill her, and it was soon after starting Prozac, and I said, that's typical Prozac. I can't say that this is the typical necessarily drug reaction, drug to be influencing, because it's so much a part of ordinary adolescent life. The part that's not ordinary is where someone whose whole idea about life is saving people and keeping people from being hurt. Friends she's rescued from suicide. Even other friends say her, you saved a lot of people. Do you know that? Friends say that to her in the texting. This is the girl's whole life.
Because she's claiming to say, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize, Your Honor. They're praising her for saving people's lives because she goes around claiming to save people.
Oh no, some of those friends feel she's extremely important.
Okay, all right.
Those texts speak for themselves.
So this disturbing text message is sent on June 19th when she's finishing up in McLean's, that she is texting this woman who she's trying to, that she's upset that they're not talking, is the greatest moment of her life, correct? Okay. And you would agree with me that after she goes to Anchor Counseling and after Conrad dies, one of the things she makes sure to mention is Alice is going to go to the wake with her.
Objection.
Fair. Agreed, Your Honor. Now, just a few more questions. I'm almost done, Your Honor. Thank you. Now, sir, when you were talking about the FDA approval process, I believe you testified that during these trials, there's hardly ever actual suicides, correct?
Right.
And you said that's because they give people hope, and that makes them feel better, correct?
Yeah, it's more complicated. That's one of the factors.
Okay. Well, that's what you said, right? That people are given hope, and that makes them feel better.
Yes, but there's much more that goes.
I'm just asking you if that's what you said.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would agree with me that when people, even if they're suicidal, if given hope, will feel better?
Yes, I'm not.
Okay.
He does not respond.
I'm not asking, sir. I just asked you if you would agree with me that if people who are suicidal, generally speaking, if given hope by your own testimony, it makes them feel better.
Generally speaking, it does.
Now, when you wrote your report about the defendant, it's separated into various sections, correct? Okay, and the sections are separated, highlighted, underlined, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, but there were a few times where you also bolded things in the middle of the text, correct? In the middle of a section.
Yeah, the offense.
Okay, well,
Once in a while,
right. Once in a while, you would also bold things as well, correct?
then I'd say that.
Okay. Now, two of the things you bolded were that I'll just read it. Again, I'm not basing these conclusions on anything Michelle has communicated to me, but rather I'm basing it on medical records of the text and interviews ahead, as well as my decades of clinical experience and scientific research regarding involuntary intoxications with psychiatric drugs. Why did that need to be bolded twice, sir? Why was that so important?
Oh, because I had interviewed him.
So you would agree with me, that's really important.
Yeah.
Now, sir, in the books that you write that are case studies, do the people that you write about, do they have to sign a release so you can write a book about them?
Not in most cases. They're almost all medical legal, but they're almost all public arena. The few places where I have, none of them are my patients except one, and the issues, the criminal issues, happened before he saw me. I was involved in this criminal case, and he came to me after the criminal case, referred to me by state psychiatrist to help with all his drugs, and I had a long, lengthy discussion with him about whether I could write about him with minimal disguise.
So let me ask you a more specific question. Medication Madness is a book about many case studies of people you've interviewed and cases you've testified on, correct?
Yes, some of them I've seen clinically. One of them, only one of them, I have no medical records on. Yes, they have. Yes.
Okay. So if you want to write a book about somebody that you are examined or strike that offer an opinion in court but never actually treated them, do they need to sign a release so you can write a book about them?
Objection, Your Honor. It's a legal question, I think.
Did anyone in the Carter family sign a release so you could write a book about? I asked if anyone in the Carter family had signed a release so that he could write about his particular findings in this case. No more questions. Thank you.
Yes. Morning, Doctor. Doctor, you mentioned on cross-examination that you last night found two confirmations about Michelle cutting herself. Could you please elaborate on that?
Well, when I first went confirmed and you're distressed about seeing the cuts on the arm. And actually they highlighted them, but there's so many records, only a vague memory about it. And last night I went through and I did find those records, and then I
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
This is a variety of dates. Thank you.
I ask you to take a look at those, Doctor, and tell me what they are.
Well, these are extracts from the massive texting. One of them isn't highlighted, so I'm going to take a minute and go through it.
Okay. To direct your attention, there's a little blue dot.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
If you could kindly read that aloud, if that's what you were referring to.
This is to Lexi, Your Honor, and she says.
Date and time, please, Your Honor, if I may.
What's that, please?
Date and time, please, if I may.
Thank you. 3/30/2014, 9:08, 8 minutes after 9. And,
To Lexi, did you say?
yes,
Ms. Cobb?
yes, it's 9, yes, it's from, it's two Lexi. Let me get straight, it's a little bit hard on my eyes, let me get straight. I'm starting at 3/30/2014.
Your Honor, if I may interrupt, can I display it maybe on the bigger? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I may approach.
I've got it now. I'll play it. I think that's a good idea.
Water dark?
Yes.
I'll pull that up. Can you see that, Doctor?
Yeah, we're looking at 3/30/2014, 9:14. To Lexi from Michelle. Okay, well, I've also been dealing with cutting. And I'm trying to stop, but it's hard for me. From Lexi. I saw your arm the other day. I just didn't want to say anything.
And that was one of the ones you were referring to?
Yes.
And there was the second one that you were referring to? Out of the...
This is on 4/10/2014 at 8:15. And this is to Lisa. And she's saying to Lisa, when we were at your locker, something in your face changed. What was wrong? Lisa says, you've been cutting yourself more. And then she says to Lisa, I thought it was that. I was going to tell you that I've actually been cut free for a week now. Those were scars.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, what was the clinical significance to you of the texting between Michelle Carter and Sam Boardman on July 10th of 2014 when she was also texting Conrad Roy?
Oh, I got to focus on that.
Yeah, I'm switching. Yes, I jumped.
Yeah, so you give me the context now. We're July 10?
July 10th. On July 10 of 2014, what was the clinical significance to you of the texting between Michelle and Sam Boardman while Michelle was also texting Conrad?
May I have a view of it again, sir? I don't want to discuss memory of specific texts.
Right. A few minutes ago, my sister put up on the big board and had you go through that Michelle was texting with Sam Boardman.
Yeah.
This is, Doctor, this is when she was texting to Ms. Gordon, allegedly, that Mr. Roy was missing, while simultaneously, according to the text, texting Mr. Roy. Is it characterization?
It is, absolutely. Thank you.
Refresh your information. Well, first of all, it is very hard to know what's going on there. It's very hard. But it certainly is alerting people to her involvement in this. To say that she's got some remote reason that this is going to be a dry run to get her attention is...
Objection, completely non-responsive to the question, Your Honor.
It's his response to it, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Makes no sense to me, clinically, that that's what she's doing. I think she's going through a lot of very weird things inside her head, very disturbed things, which is in and out of reality, is it dead, is it not dead, what's been going on. She gets, for example, extremely upset when she finds out that he's dead.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right. Doctor, what are the anchor counseling records?
These are the records where she was being treatment immediately after the claim. She was discharged from the claim same day she goes to anchor, so there's a complete continuity there, except it's nearer to the tragedy.
And did you place any significance on these anchor counseling records in forming your opinions? Can you please describe why so?
Well, for the first time, it's coming out what a burden the relationship is with her with contact. She's actually now communicating to an adult that she feels, quote, overwhelmed by the relationship with contact. And she's also communicating enough other information that the adult is writing down that she has this caretaker relationship with a young man. I forget the exact words. I wouldn't mind having a refresher.
Did something refresh your recollection on that? Your memory?
Yeah, but I mean, she's saying he's in trouble with something. And this is a real problem for her. This is the first time it's coming out, and it comes out, days before she does it.
And Doctor, can you please explain the adverse effects of Celexa as they manifest themselves months later versus 3 or 4 days later, as you spoke about on your cross?
Yes, I can.
Could you please elaborate?
There's a huge list that's going through on all the drugs for adverse drug reactions. When I was looking inside the drug company, particularly Paxil, one of the lists, I was interested in when do the names of adverse reactions become apparent. Because doctors were saying, within the first 3 days the drug doesn't do it, it takes 6 weeks for the drug to do it. They were misinformed. The drug company had to put out the information of what was happening in the first few days with these drugs. And I went through and began to take a good look at it, and I published it. I published the data. And in those first 3 to 4 days, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of agitation, a lot of all of the expected routine stimulant effects of the drug that I described. The irritability, the akathisia, which is this impulsive anguish moving it out. And that there was a burst of them in the first 3 days. Now, that is a specific phenomenon, this broad range of adverse effects. In fact, in the first dose, and I explained why on the board. And I pointed out that, for example, with the first dose, the production of serotonin was cut back by the cell. Because the cell then says, warning about very severe reactions and when to receive them. They are mostly addressing suicide, but it also addresses a whole range of severe reactions. And what the FDA says in two different, well, one place it says several months, and that's right in the actual focus of the information. And I believe 3 months is well within several months, and it's also well within my experience.
And doctor, what's the FDA warning about Celexa in children under 18?
Well, it's warning about all of these things.
But for children specifically, Celexa in children under 18.
Oh, but it's saying don't use it. Well, it's something very specific.
And, okay, thank you. And,
I didn't
good.
answer.
Okay, the specificity of that is what?
The record is very specific. The FDA goes a little out of its way to say that Celexa's application was rejected. Now that's proprietary information that you usually can't get. So the FDA wanted the doctor specifically to know we rejected this drug.
And can you explain, and since the original voir dire you had back a few months ago, you've received additional information?
Yes.
And you've analyzed that information?
Yes.
And how did that change your opinion as to an involuntary intoxication, if it did?
Well, not at all.
And you spoke on cross-examination about Conrad Roy's stepping stone records on June 30th. Do you recall Conrad Roy's subsequently texting Michelle after that?
Yes, I'd have to be refreshed, but I do remember.
And asked you, doctor, to take a look at that on June 30th, starting with the highlight from Conrad Roy.
Absolutely, identification's fine.
I understand the thing, they will also not be one that did it. So, absolutely. That will conclude the evidentiary portion of the trial. Will you give us those down, Mr. Stone?
The charts? Yeah, I was going to do it in just a couple of minutes. I'm assuming we're going to be breaking. And if
They should be included with the file so that I have the benefit.
and I do, if I may approach the clerk, I do have one motion to be filed.
All right, let's see that motion.
Thank you.
At this time, Mr. Cataldo, unless you like to proceed otherwise, I would take this motion under advisement.
That would be correct.
At this time, Mr. Cataldo, unless you like to proceed otherwise, I would take this motion under advisement.
That would be perfectly fine, yes. Yes. It is, Your Honor.
All right. Do you need to be heard on the motion, or are you satisfied with that approach?
With regard to this, satisfied. Thank you.
All right, good. Okay. So we are now done with the evidentiary portion. Financial counsel started off with and then at that time, I will express that I'll take the matter under advisement.
And then at that time, I fully expect that I will take the matter under advisement to consider all the evidence in the law. But we will be in recess until 2:30. Thank you very much.
All rise.